get to the recording before we get going here. There we are. Welcome, everybody, to the September 29 team meeting of the DFW SharePoint and Office 365 user group. I'm waiting for our attendees to start showing up. I don't see anybody in the attendees list.
I see zero myself. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
John and I are here.
Yeah.
Someone have a.
We're excited to hear
Here they go. Here they go. All right. They all came in at once. All right.
I was like, are we in the wrong spot or are they?
Wow.
We must have got our time wrong. All right. Well, welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the September 2019 meeting of the DFW SharePoint and Office 365 user group. We have quite a lot to get to today, so we're going to jump right into it. Let me begin by sharing our slide deck. There we go. All right. So I want to welcome my fellow presenters. Jennifer Roth is here. Corey is here. Muted.
Hello.
There's Corey. Chris Webb is lurking about somewhere, I'm sure. Hopefully we will find him at some point. Paul McCollum, I'm sure, is here somewhere as well. So hopefully they will come on and join us here in a few minutes. We're also joined by our fellow partners in crime, MVPs, and globetrotting ne'er-do-wells, Jason Himmelstein and John White.
It's the first time I've been called a ne'er-do-well. Thank you.
I kind of liked it. I
like it.
Yeah. For us, John.
Yeah.
And in our true coast-to-coast manner, we have Jason on the West Coast in Seattle, not in his normal environs of San Antonio. And we have John White coming to us from the wilds of Upper Nowhere's Duel somewhere, Canada. I have no idea where you are, dude.
Just outside of Toronto. Just about an hour west of Toronto. Yeah.
I hope there's like a bear outside your window right now.
No. I'm a little too far south for bears, I'm afraid.
Oh, that's a bummer.
He does get porcupines,
wouldn't that be
though?
Great if there was
I
a
do get
moose just
porcupines.
looking in the window.
Oh, yeah. A couple of years ago, I had a porcupine on my lap, so there you go.
If there was a moose drinking a Molson outside your window right now, that would be the most Canadian thing ever.
Yeah. Or riding a moose going through a Tim Hortons drive-through.
Yeah. While apologizing.
Yeah. While apologizing, that's right.
While eating cheese curds. All right, so let us thank our sponsors here at the very top. Our longest-running sponsor, K2, of course, Training Plus from Combined Knowledge, Sundown Solutions, and us at BinaryWave, along with, it looks like our deck is automatically advancing itself. TrippLite, Ampio Solutions, and SparkHound as our gold sponsors. A little bit of housekeeping here. Last month's webcast has now been posted. You can find it on our channel with the link there that's in the slide deck. By the way, if you would like to access the slide deck, you can go over to the handouts portion and grab the slide deck and download it so you have all of these links. We've now also posted our recordings onto our YouTube channel. Did you all know we have a YouTube channel? We do have a YouTube channel. And we posted the recordings there so you can get them on YouTube as well. Following that link, or just going to YouTube and search for DFW SharePoint. I think that'll get you there as well. All right, upcoming events, things that are happening soon. Of course, Microsoft Ignite, if you were planning on going, well, it's sold out. You can get on the waiting list if you like, or you can come and I think they still sell floor passes and whatnot to wander about, or just come and hang out at the parties. You could do that too. That'll be November 4th through the 8th. You can, if you're there on the 4th, you are obligated to buy both Jennifer and I drinks because that is both of our birthdays. So be sure to find us and buy us a beverage. SharePoint Fest coming up in December 9th through the 13th in Chicago, Illinois. December in Chicago is always a lovely time of year. Office and SharePoint Live once again in Orlando, both of which I will be at. So I have a whole break of a week in between trips to Orlando, which is at
that's painful.
Wow, 2 weeks in Orlando.
I know. I'm going to be in sad shape. I also have the wrong link.
At least they're
It is
not contiguous.
SharePoint NA. It is Office and SharePoint Live, but it is the wrong link that I have not corrected from last time. So shame on me. That is the Office and SharePoint Live. Just search that up and you'll find it in Orlando. And then, somebody added something else here. Office 365 Pulse. What is that?
That's
is that
me.
yours?
Yeah,
Oh, cool.
So that's the video show that Adam Oakes, Tom Duff, and myself do every week. So it's usually 15 to 20 minutes, and it's all of the roadmap updates. So I do a PDF of all of the roadmap that you can share with everybody, and then we talk through it. So I spend a couple hours every week going through all of the crazy roadmap changes. I download them from all sorts of places, do some magic, find out what has changed, and then we share it with you guys. So there's a YouTube channel. We've been doing it about 25 weeks now. So we try to keep it 15 minutes. We try to keep commentary off, so it's just the facts, because we could talk about anything. But we try to keep it to just what's changed. So you guys can subscribe to it there if you guys want weekly roadmap updates.
Yeah, that's excellent. So we need to put a link in our YouTube channel over to that one to make sure.
Awesome. That'd be awesome.
Follow it over. Yeah, excellent. Very good. And that's when on Wednesdays?
We do it at a different time every week. It's kind of like when the three of us can get together and do it. We don't do it live. We pre-record it and then just post it.
So we just watch the YouTube channel, wait for a new video to come up?
Yep. And then we post it on social.
Is it there yet? Is it there yet?
Exactly. Because everyone's just sitting around waiting for that.
That's right. Fantastic. So I should mention, I see in the chat a couple of people having issues with the video. We put this now in the email that goes out to everybody, but Big Marker really likes Chrome and doesn't like to work on anything else. So if you run Chrome with a default profile, unlike Mr. White, who wants to use the Edgium and live on the wild side, if you'll use Chrome with a default profile, that usually works the best for Big Marker. Okay, we have a big announcement here. We will be broadcasting live every day from Ignite in November. So the entire week, every day, we'll be doing a user group webcast. We will drag unsuspecting members of the community onto the webcast as they happen to wander by, and get them to offer their opinions and insights. We'll give you a recap of everything that's happened during the day. We will do our very best to watch and attend sessions and give you content from those sessions if we possibly can, and with as many guests as we can rope together. So it should be a fun time. That will be every day. We don't know what time slot they're going to give us yet. So hopefully we'll get some more information on that. It has been posted to the website, and we'll send it out in an email to everyone once we have those times locked down. On to our news, but we don't have Chris. So he's going to cover off our news, but he is gone. And I don't see him in the list of attendees. Oh, there he is. Chris, you're there. Let me see if I can. He's listed as an admin. Chris, do you want to join us, sir, and do your portion? How about we come back to Chris? Jen, why don't you take it away?
Okay, cool. So end user stuff is all about the web parts this time. So new web parts, we have a button and a call to action. A lot of this is coming, if you were at the SharePoint conference last year, you saw all this stuff about home sites and the ability to build these really great intranet sites. These are a lot of the components are now finally hitting our tenants. And so a button and a call to action. I put a why in there as to why you might even want to use this. It's really about driving people to content experiences. So you're focusing text on a button, they're going to click it, and it's going to open a new content experience. So that's why you would be taking them from page to page. So it's like if you're trying to guide them, think through a process or something like that. I'm giving them more text. I want them to have a guided experience. That's when I'm using those buttons. We have a world clock. You really may need it. We have a weather web part that got updated. Hero web part got updated, and what they basically did is gave you my page changed.
Yeah, sorry. Let me fix that.
That's okay.
Keep going. Keep going.
They gave you a call to action for large tiles. So anything that is a large tile in the Hero web part is going to get the call to action, so you get the 2 links on it. And then a quick tip there is to use the primary link for more information and the secondary link for employee discussions and engaging the employees. So that's kind of a quick adoption trip. They realized that in the hero web part, they were getting good success with that. So that might be a way to use it. I think sometimes when these features get pushed out, people are like, "What? Like, why are you giving me so many bells and whistles? I don't necessarily need them." So trying to share some ideas there. The highlighted content web part, this is a good one. We get custom query filtering. This is going to be borderline end user, but not end user. This is where you're going to want to pass this off to your citizen developers, because you know how you guys always wanted the highlighted content web part to act like the custom query web part, and it kind of didn't. It was that successor, which means that it's not going to behave like the old one, but it doesn't have to because we called it a successor instead of a replacement. This is getting it closer. So you're going to want to check that out. And then an email roll-up of missed SharePoint news post, because they really want you to read the news post. So if you're not in SharePoint reading them, they're going to just email them to you. So there you go. So you're going to get a roll-up of those. And then this one isn't news, but I think it's going to be one that will cause your users to act like Joey from Blossom. I'm showing my age here, right? Where they go, whoa. Anyway, the new list experience. I'm starting to hear rumblings where it's rolling out, and I'm starting to see, like, I'll see on Twitter, and somebody will be like, holy cow, my new list experience just changed. Like, I was in the middle of doing something, and now it's different. And so it's starting to hit first release, but it's been in first release for a while. It hasn't really hit anyone I know in first release, except for now it's starting to expand. So they must be growing that ring of first release. So it goes first release based on whatever criteria they're doing, and then it keeps growing until it gets to GA. So it's starting to hit people's environments. I don't have it in any of my environments yet. I don't know if anybody on the any on our crew has it in their environments yet.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, just be aware, because this is, I think in most cases, users are going to be able to navigate through this, but it's so different that somebody's going to go, holy goodness, what's going on? So if you are in first release, I just wanted you guys to be aware of it, because it could be coming quickly if you're in first release. So I didn't want anyone to be shocked. So those are my end user focused updates. I'm really excited about it though. Can't wait to have it.
All right. Do you think that's going to cause some training issues though? Because that's a big change.
A million training issues.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I think they're actually making it easier. I think most people who are going to be creating a list, if they shouldn't be creating a list, are probably not going to click around too much and go to the classic things. If they should be creating a list, it's going to be pretty easy to navigate through it. And I think it's going to be easy enough to navigate through. So I don't think it's going to be awful. I think it's actually a really good experience. And some of the stuff that should have worked forever is actually going to work now. So I think it's to be seen. I think we all think it's going to cause a huge issue, but it might actually be okay. But we'll kind of see.
We'll see. Okay. All right.
Ask me next month.
Yeah, right. All right. Very good. Well, thank you for that, Jen. Chris, do we have you on audio yet? I don't think we have Chris. He said he had some problems with his video. But we don't have them on audio yet. So Corey, developer news.
All right. We had a kind of packed month last month with developer news. Not a whole lot going on this month. I suspect Microsoft's starting to get ready for, Ignite and things like that. We're going to start seeing some stabilization, almost a gap in things as they're looking to do, some announcements coming up on November. This one did come out today. This is Microsoft Graph Sample Data Packs. And so part of your Office 365 developer program membership, which you can find by clicking on that link as well, you get all sorts of great little tools. And one of them is to provide you the ability to create sample data, sample users, sample content. This is outside of the content engine that you might have as a partner where you can get demo tenants. So it's really a way to take a developer tenant and apply some content to it. So brand new, I think. Check it out. Other than that, we have our usual updates for the community, our development community September update, the PNP community call, and the SPFX community call. And there's a wave of other community calls now as well that you can kind of find through navigating those links. If you've never been on one of those, it's definitely worth taking the time to attend, especially if you have kind of concerns. Sometimes they hint at roadmap things that aren't necessarily public yet. They speak to the rails that they can sort of speak within, right? But it's definitely a way if you want to be engaged and kind of have an idea what's going on in the community and what's coming around the development stack. These calls are definitely worth the time to attend every once in a while.
I concur. All right, great. Thank you, Corey, for that. I see Chris is there. Now? Yeah, there you are.
All right. I'm going with the ghetto laptop setup right now. So.
All right, well, go for it. You're up. Can you see the slide?
Yeah, I see it.
Right, perfect.
It just went away. Okay, now I'm good. Yeah, so I'll cover these real quick. So if you haven't heard the news, they updated the message center posts on private channels. Not surprised, they pushed them back closer to Ignite. And they were supposed to start launching, rolling out this month, but now they're saying late October, early November. So they have launched some new things though. So per team analytics is now live. So you can go into your team as an owner. I'm not sure if members can do it or not. I haven't gone that much into detail, but you can go on each team. There's like an analytics button in the team setting. You can go in there and see, all the stats for messages posted over time, channel usage, all that stuff. So it's pretty nifty. They're going to expand on that. So per conversation, mute follow. This kind of got snuck in, wasn't on the roadmap or anything, but I think it's huge, especially for bigger teams. So what you can do with that is similar to Facebook or anything else. Like if there's a conversation with a whole lot of chatting going on and it goes way off topic and you're tired of getting notifications for it, you can go up to the thread on the conversation, click the ... and say mute conversation. You'll stop getting alerts for it. And you can do it in reverse too. If there's something that's, say you got notifications set up for only show me new messages in a channel, you can go to that channel, click the ... and say follow that channel so you can get replies to it. Say you don't follow the whole channel for everything. You just want to choose which ones you want to get replies to, and you can do that now. So one-to-one calling support for Chromium browsers has gotten active last week, I believe. So previously you could only do meetings on browsers, but now you can actually go into chat, do one-to-one calls with people via the browsers now. So that's a pretty big one for a lot of customers. Calendar app finally went live. I was calling it vaporware last month, but they actually enabled it. So now you can see a bigger view of your upcoming meetings for week to week, and you can kind of scroll back and forward and see everything in time, as before you only could do the current week you were on. And then channel moderation, that also went live. So basically every channel now you can set, can people post new items? Can only owners do it? Can guests post new conversations? You can do a lot of tweaks with that on a per channel level. So that's about all I got for teams.
Cool. Very good. All right. Thank you, Chris.
Yep.
So now let's jump down to Mr. McCollum. I see you're on the phone. Are you with us, sir?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
Take it away,
Okay.
Mr. Flo.
Just been doing some digging on the updates to flows. It is progressing nicely. Some new features being added. There are some updates coming up to the exchange components, so watch for deprecation and new connections to the Graph API. So they're just starting to merge those standards together, so some of the syntax may be changing if you're already plugging in to some of the exchange flow actions. The Flow Online Conference 2019 that took place on September 10th was an all-day event with multiple sessions, is available on YouTube now. I've got the link there, so you can watch all 9 hours of the conference and the different sessions talking about the directions they're heading with flows and some of the capabilities. It's actually turned pretty nice. It's, I don't know, I'm having fun migrating some of the stuff I've done in SharePoint Workflow Designer or Designer Workflows over to that. And it's quicker and easier in a lot of cases. That's all for me.
Did Paul just say he was having fun in SharePoint Designer Workflows? Because, we're in an alternate universe. Paul is having fun, and we're
in the
SharePoint
cloud.
Designer in the cloud.
In the cloud. Yes. The cloud has caught up, and it is fun again. Yes, I know. I'm sorry.
Who are you, and what have you done with Paul?
I've been waterboarded with the Kool-Aid.
And you've been drinking heavily of it, I see. All right. Excellent.
No choice.
Well, thank you for that update, sir. Very good. So we will very shortly here jump into our featured presentation from our friends John White and Jason Himmelstein. Couple of things for you as we're going through their presentation. So they have a lot of information to cover, and they've got some really cool demos as well. So if you have questions, please flip over to the Q&A channel. We'll try and moderate those and sneak them into their conversation as we can. We may hold off on a few of them until the end if it looks like they're going to be sort of a longer Q&A that we need to get into. So please, if you could jump over to the Q&A tab when you have questions, because we'll be looking there. For those of you who might happen to fall off a bit early, the recording will go up next week, both to our Big Marker channel and to our YouTube channel. So you can catch up if you have to jump out and you miss anything, you'll be able to catch up there. But before we jump into the main meat of the presentation, John and Jason, if folks want to see you live and in person somewhere sometime soon, where will you be?
Oh, we got a bunch of stuff coming up. Jace, you're on mute, just in case you're wondering.
Yeah, I was coming off. Don't worry.
Normally, you're all over that like a fat kid on a Smartie.
Well, I've been dieting, John. So let's see. This week we're at the DFW, SharePoint, and Office 365 user group. I think we got that one pretty well covered off.
SharePoint Saturday, Ottawa. I'll be at that first weekend in October. I think it's the 5th.
I think we've got a couple things we're doing at Ignite. We've got a 45-minute session on Power BI and paginated reports. We've got the podcast we're doing, I think, twice, and then we've got a bunch of
how to do a
other
podcast
stuff. Yeah, we're doing an unconference. We're doing a session on. I'm doing a PowerShell session, John. I think. I don't think you're joining me for that, but and then we're doing SharePoint Fest in DC. Or sorry. That'll be next year. We're doing the one in Chicago, and then you're doing European. We're everywhere.
Eric,
that's the easiest answer I got.
So a few things coming up.
All right, very good. So for those of you who don't know, John and Jason also host a podcast themselves called Bifocal. It is monthly or thereabouts.
Weekly.
Oh,
every week.
That's too much effort for me.
I agree with that.
So you can catch up with them on the Bifocal podcast as well, which they do from all sorts of interesting locations, I've noted, which often tend to be bars. I don't know why that happens that way.
Whether it's a bar or whether we're just drinking, that's debatable. It's just frequently I'm on the go, and so we record from wherever we are. We generally get really good guests from Microsoft as well. We just finished dropping all of the recordings that we did at the MBAS conference, the Microsoft Business Application Summit in Atlanta this summer. We've got some great support from Microsoft, especially in the Power BI product team. So we take those conversations wherever we can get them and try and get them out there and share them with the user community.
We got to reload at Ignite too. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I am going to get out of the way and turn it over to the capable hands of Misters White and Himmelstein. So, gentlemen, take it away.
Start the engine, says it will. All right. So, start sharing the screen. I'm just going to make sure I share the right one. There we go. And away we go. All right. Well, you've seen the title. You've seen our name. So, I'll just dispense with this slide and go straight to introductions. Just a little more on, if I can click on it. There we go. A little more on me. I'll start off with me. My name's John White. That funny accent is Canadian. I'm from Canada. Yes. I use that joke at every session. So sometimes it gets a laugh. Sometimes it doesn't. I wouldn't know if it did now. I'm the CTO and co-founder of a company actually called Unlimited Viz. We are the makers of tyGraph. tyGraph is analytics software for all of Office 365. So we have products for SharePoint, OneDrive. We've got products for Teams, Yammer, and then we've got it for Office 365 as a whole. Like Jason, I'm an Office Apps and Services MVP as well as a Data Platform MVP. Those are my credentials on the screen. So if you neglect to put something in the Q&A, which is what you should do, feel free to reach out to me afterwards if you got questions for this. And to answer the question, yes, that's me in the picture doing what I like to do when I'm not doing this. It also explains my rather odd Twitter handle, but my name is John White. Good luck getting that one.
And then, to be fair, when John and I first met, I did think he was just a really big Van Halen fan.
Exactly.
All right. Now, so the next slide up should be me. There I am. Hello. So hi guys and ladies. My name is Jason Himmelstein. I am Director of Technical Strategy at Rackspace. I'm, as John said, an MVP in a bunch of different fun things that John's already talked about. So feel free, reach out to me after the session if you have any questions. I am a Texan as well. I live in San Antonio. And in fact, I'm going to make the announcement right here, right now, for all to hear. We are bringing SharePoint Saturday San Antonio back. It will be in 2020. It's going to be May the 2nd, 2020. So come on down to San Antonio. It's a great time of year to be there. Hopefully John will make it down for it. It's going to be an awesome time. We haven't done it in a couple of years. It's been 2 years, but Eric's been pushing me a little bit. When are you guys going to bring it back? So Eric, on your user group's recording, I'm making the announcement here. So San Antonio, May the 2nd, 2020. We're being hosted very politely by DeVry University. They gave us free space. So we're very excited for that. That picture is obviously not San Antonio. Nothing in San Antonio is that green right now because it's been summer. Although my lawn is fairly green, we used a lot of water this summer trying to keep it healthy. That's New Zealand. I am very fortunate. I get to travel the world and go talk with our customers. And really, right now I'm in Seattle, as I think was mentioned earlier. So I get the ability to go out and just interact with people in the world, understand their business problems, and try and help them find a solution. And we do that podcast that we mentioned earlier. It is a weekly podcast. Sometimes it comes out on Tuesday. Sometimes it comes out on Friday. Sometimes it comes out on late Sunday night. But we do get one out every week. This week, we are going to be dropping the episode about this month's desktop drop. It's one of our more popular episodes every month. Microsoft puts out a new version of Power BI Desktop that we'll be talking about here in just a few minutes when we dig into the Power BI side of this conversation. But we go through all the things that are new and different in the ecosystem in the space. So that's us, and that's the T-shirt I'm wearing today. You know, you're not supposed to wear the T-shirt of the band you're going to see, but I break that rule and wear it for the podcast. All right, so we're going to dive in and talk about Power BI with SharePoint. Since this is a SharePoint and Office 365 user group, we want to bring this together for all worlds. So we're going to dig in. Here's our agenda for the day. We're going to cover off some of the basics. We're going to cover off SharePoint as a container, then SharePoint as a data source, and we're going to use SharePoint as a reporting canvas, and then we're going to wrap it all up. In case you're wondering, all of these pictures, you can't find them when you do a content-free search in Bing. These are actually John's underwater pictures. So that's a squiddy-looking thing that we're going to use for the intro to basics. Don't try and tie out the picture to the content, guys. That's not a thing. John just likes his pictures. And I do too. So what is Power BI? Well, Power BI is Microsoft's new answer to enterprise business intelligence. It's also Microsoft's answer to team business intelligence and personal business intelligence. So it's really that there's a grow-up story to it, which is really nice. It's accessible self-service reporting and analytics, but it's not just for the enterprise, and it's not just for the end user. The nice thing when we cover off the little bit of licensing that we'll talk about is that everything that we're going to talk about today, you can do. I'm just going to give you the primer. Everything we're going to talk about today, you can do for free up to the point where you want to share the experience with someone else. So all the stuff that we're going to talk about, you're able to go off and start doing right away until you want somebody else to see that information. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later on. So as we dig into it, what is Power BI? Well, Power BI is made up of a number of different components. And And that the main component that we talk about is the ETL engine, that extract, transform, and load engine. That's the power behind Power BI. We refer to it as Power Query, but it really is that in the business intelligence sphere, it's the ETL engine. Behind that, we also have once we've extracted, transformed our data, and then loaded it in, we have a modeling engine. And John's appropriately given it 2 L's because it's that important of a thing, that modeling is really that important. We took this from the SharePoint world, actually. The Power Pivot engine, it's a part of the SQL world, it's been a part of the SharePoint world. For anybody who's done Power BI, you probably recognize it from your SharePoint time looking at Power Pivot. So that's the X Velocity engine, as it was first called. All of the fun things that we can do with that is what we get in that modeling engine, that DAX, data analysis expression language. And then we have the reporting platform, whether you're looking at it for dashboards or reports in the Power BI service, or we'll talk a little bit about it in ways that you can visualize these things in SharePoint, which are going to be those reports, or if you happen to be staying on-prem, you're looking at Power BI Report Server. So we'll cover a little bit of each of these things off. There are different things that we refer to when we're talking about consumption and creation. When we talk about consumption, we're really looking at it in the browser. Okay, yes, you can go off and view your reports in Power BI Desktop. You can do all of that, but really the experience that we want to have is through a web browser, or we could see it in Teams, in the Teams app, or in the mobile app. So all of those are browser-based experiences, though. When we're doing true creation, yes, there is a creation capability. It's kind of limited in the browser. When we're talking about creation, when we're talking about design, we're really talking about Power BI Desktop as the engine for that.
I went a little too far there, Jace. There you go.
That's okay. I'm just I'm waiting. John's controlling the slides in case you're wondering why the giant pause is here. Being as he's in Canada and I'm in Seattle at the moment. So what is SharePoint? I assume that everyone who's a part of this user group has an opinion about what SharePoint is. It's the reason why I'm bald. That's one reason. That's one thing it is. It's the reason why I drink sometimes as well. But for when it comes to Power BI, when we talk about what is SharePoint, it's a file container. It's a host for list data. And it's a reporting service. That's what SharePoint, and when we're talking about SharePoint, we're not just talking about SharePoint Online. We're also talking about SharePoint On-Prem in the most modern version of it. That's what SharePoint is for Power BI. Now we go to a transition slide. Boo boo. There we go. John, this little crabby guy, I can never remember what the heck that thing is called. I just call it the rainbow crab.
It's a mantis shrimp is what it is. And that guy will kick your butt.
Yes, I'm sure that he would. But if we can transition off into the next slide. I mentioned the fact that we can create and we can do something with our data in the web browser. This is that get data experience. And we're going to have a get data experience in both the web browser and in Power BI Desktop. But when it comes to the browser, as I said, it's rather limited. Okay, we can connect up to CSV and Excel files. We have the ability to go in and do reporting and do our dashboards. It's the only way that we can go off and do that is through the web browser. We can connect up to any SharePoint Online library. We can also connect up to OneDrives, and that's local file as well, but please don't use local file. And we can do an hourly refresh based upon that when we're connecting with the browser. So those are the things that we really can do with the browser. And you get the full reporting canvas. It's just you can't do anything from a mashup perspective with other data sources. It really is CSV and Excel files, and that's pretty much it. The other thing that we get in that web browser is the ability to either to connect up to those Excel files, and we can either do an import from an Excel file, which means we're taking the data, sucking it out of that Excel file, and now it's a standalone static set of data, or we can connect up to the data that stays in Excel, so that if that Excel workbook does get updated, we can get those changes and we can get that refreshed into those Power BI reports. Those are the two ways that we can interact with Excel in this fashion.
All right, I think I'm taking over now.
I think so. But John, before we go any further, we've got this little QR code thing in the bottom right hand corner. In the bottom left hand corner, there's a URL there. What's that all about?
That's going to take you to a Microsoft Forms form. If you want to fill that out and give us your email address, you'll automatically be mailed a link to this presentation. So we've got a real-time Power BI demo that we do sometimes. It's not part of this particular session in behind it, but it's basically just using Microsoft Forms and Flow to get you a copy of this deck. So it'll be up to date as of right now. So as Jason was mentioning, we can either import from, or we can connect to Excel files in place. And of course, connecting to an Excel file in place is just like the experience you would get in SharePoint, but you also get the ability to refresh that file. And to understand really how that works, I think it's important to understand what's in an Excel file. So if you look at that little graphic that's on the screen, this is basically the result of renaming an XLSX file to .rar in my case, or .zip is what you can rename it to, and opening it up and have a look at it. I imagine a bunch of the folks listening to this have already done that sort of thing. And that file just basically consists of a number of components. So what are those components? Well, you can see some of them right in here. To start with, Excel, of course, is going to, in a lot of cases, have worksheet data, basically a big rectangle of data, rows and columns of numbers and letters, etc. So that's the data. That's kind of Excel classic. You can also have visuals in an Excel workbook, right? You can have various charts or pivot charts and pivot tables, and they can connect to data in those worksheets. But visuals can also connect to data in a data model. So an Excel file since about 2008 can contain these things called data models. At the time, we called them Power Pivot. But this model that's in the Excel file is exactly the same model that's behind Power BI. So it's got that level of compatibility going on. So you need to keep that in mind when we talk about importing, etc. An Excel file also has two types of connections now. For years and years and years, we had the classic ODC type of connection when you connect it to data to bring it into a worksheet. You'd immediately have to save a file off, usually to your desktop, and your desktop got littered with these ODC files all over the place. That is kind of old school. The way we do it now is through Power Query. Again, that's that same Power Query that we get with Power BI. So that's 2 points of commonality between Power BI and Excel. In fact, the two of them are kind of the same, except for the concept of worksheets. So worksheets are a concept that is unique to Excel. So both of these types of connections are available to us. If anybody, I know Jason has. Jason, you used to use Power View all the time, didn't you?
I used to use Power View all the time because I like visuals. I like pretty things. Like the slide that you're supposed to be on right now has a bunch of different green and blue and really pretty boxes on it, as opposed to the gray background with the Excel import from and connect to. I like pretty things. And unfortunately, those things were brought to us by Silverlight. Not PowerPoint, which if you clicked forward on the slides right now, John, we'd be looking at the right slide, which works really well. Silverlight, not so much.
I just got to finish this one off. But Power View is basically the predecessor of Power BI reporting. So we talked about Power Query and Power Pivot, and we also Power View is basically those three elements: those reporting, ETL, and data modeling capabilities. If we just take those out and put them in their own thing, we have something, well, basically we call Power BI. That's really what Power BI is. Excel also could have these things called 3D maps in them that connect to data models, but they don't play on the web. We won't be talking about them anymore. Microsoft certainly doesn't talk about them anymore.
Hey, John, do you want to stop your sharing and start it again? Because we're not following you with the slides.
Oh, it just failed. That's what Jason was trying to tell me.
I was trying to be subtle about it as to not make the attendees of this user group think that we were some 2-bit operation who was using Edgium instead of Chrome.
But we are some 2-bit operation. I am sharing right now. That's odd.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, go ahead and stop it and restart the sharing. Sometimes it gets lost.
Okay. So screen, and there we go. So I hope any of that made sense before. I had no idea what you were talking about, Jason. I was like, why is he going on about the next slide?
There we go. Perfect. Got it.
Because this is the next slide. All right.
There we go.
So when we interact with Excel,
John, can you go back one slide for us, just so that people can take a look and see. And obviously, if you do click on that link, or if you go to that link that's in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll get this deck. And that way you're able to follow along whether John's sharing bombs out because he refuses to use the correct browser or not. You will have all of these images to enjoy.
I believe it's a big marker as a platform that might be an issue here. I've never had this issue anywhere else.
Just keep going. Yeah,
I agree with that.
If you would have listened to directions, maybe it would work.
Whilst you
when
all
have I
are
ever done
figuring out
that?
the correct slide to be on, we do have a question that's coming in. Are there plans to introduce cognitive data services into Power BI?
Cognitive data services have already been introduced into Power BI through data flows. Thank you, John. If you use data flows in Power BI, the editing experience will allow you to bring in sentiment analysis, text extraction, phrase extraction, and one other that is escaping me at the moment. So those are already there as well. You can plug in AI models that you build yourself in Azure right into Power BI so that your ETL experience can incorporate these AI features as well. They're investing an awful lot of time and effort in that particular feature. Now, that's jumping ahead to like super advanced, but hey, that's a great question. All right. So when we're talking about working with SharePoint, in particular Excel within SharePoint, we have a number of possible scenarios. So we've been talking about using the browser to connect to Excel. And how does that all work? Well, in the first case, we may want to connect to an Excel file and import the data from it. So again, in this scenario, we're using a browser to do this. So what basically happens is the user connects into Power BI, says, hey, I would like to import this data from Excel that's sitting in SharePoint Online. What happens is that data is taken from Excel and put into this data model that's existing within Power BI. In behind the scenes, it's really an Azure Analysis Services instance, but you don't need to know that. You won't see that necessarily. And that's basically what the user interacts with. Now, the issue becomes what happens when the data in that source Excel file changes. You need to have a mechanism for refreshing it. And that's what happens on an hourly basis. And when you do it through the browser, hourly is your only option. And all you can do is turn it on or off. That file or that data model will be updated with whatever data you happen to have currently in that workbook. It's a full refresh every single time. All right. Now, if you happen to have ignored Jason's instruction and imported that Excel file from your file system, you can still update it, but the problem now is you're going to have a data gateway set up, an on-premises data gateway. Obviously, OneDrive for Business, and SharePoint Online are all in the cloud. Power BI knows how to connect directly to it. If it's on your file system, you're going to have this gateway in place, and you're going to have that data source registered with the data gateway. So that's a whole lot of, frankly, unnecessary work that you need to do. So the strong guidance is to use SharePoint. If you're going to be using Excel as a data source, put it within SharePoint. All right. That was importing from an Excel workbook. Let's look at that second option. What happens with that second option? With that second option, the user goes into Power BI, says, I want to connect to Excel. When you do that, Excel Online gets involved, just like with SharePoint, right? When you connect to Excel in SharePoint and you're viewing Excel, you're actually working with Excel Online. So same thing with Power BI, and it connects to the workbook. And if it's got a data model within it, that data model gets shipped off to that analysis services instance in behind the scenes, and the user can then interact with that data model. All right, what's the refresh story for this? And this is where things I think get fairly interesting. That data model would have been connected to some other data source. So when it comes time to refresh, Power BI is going to know about that. It can connect right straight back to that data source and update the data model as it sits in SharePoint Online. And of course, any further analysis is going to be using that refreshed data. It'll get kicked off to that analysis services instance in behind the scenes. The interesting thing is about this scenario is on a scheduled basis, you can have Power BI update your Excel files that are sitting in SharePoint, and everybody using SharePoint gets to benefit from that. It's the only way that I'm aware of that you can automatically update your Excel files that sit in SharePoint. Not a lot of people know that. Just let Power BI do that for you. So that's all browser. Now let's introduce the concept of the desktop, Power BI desktop. And Power BI desktop, like so many other Microsoft products, is really well named, right? The name tends to make you think that this is the tool you're going to use to use Power BI on a client machine, and that's not the case. It's actually the design tool. It should be called Power BI Designer, but I don't know why they didn't call it Power BI Designer. They initially did. That was the original name for it. But anyway, it is the design tool. Now, when you connect with desktop,
John, this is something that bothers you almost as much as like.
Yeah, it does. The lowercase p in SharePoint bothers you. Yeah. But when you connect with desktop, you have access to 100 and I don't know what the number is these days. Around, it was last count, it was about 120 data sources, of which, of course, Excel and CSV, etc., are in there. As well, there's a number of connectors for SharePoint, and that's where things get interesting for us. Of course, we have the full bore of Power Query available to us within desktop, and we can deploy that stuff out to the service. Once we build a report up in desktop, we publish the report to the Power BI service. And when we do that, if we want the data in the report to be refreshed automatically, we're going to have to configure that. So that whole hourly thing, that goes out the door. We can schedule things up to 8 times per day in the free service. In the premium service, we can schedule up to 48 times per day. But you must configure that. It's not just a simple matter of turning it on or off. If you've got local content, of course, you need that data gateway I was talking about before, but you can do that. And something that's very important in this world is the SharePoint folder source. If we're dealing with any kind of data within files, the thing is to be aware of the SharePoint folder source. And it's not obvious. You've got this Excel connector you can see right at the top of our frequently used files. And if you're using SharePoint, chances are you shouldn't use that connector. You can in some cases, but if you use the SharePoint folder connector, you're going to be better served. So let's have a look at what happens if we use that Excel connector. So if we're using Power BI Desktop, we're sitting there on a machine here in the middle, and Power BI Desktop connects to data that's sitting in an Excel workbook. And it takes that data and it puts it in the data model where I build the report from. So I'm building out my all of my graphs, etc. I then take that report and deploy it out to the Power BI service. And then my consuming users interact with that report there. At refresh time, we want to update the data in that model. Remember where that data came from. It came from an Excel on a file system somewhere. Well, SharePoint has to connect back through a gateway because the Excel connector is a file system based connector. That's the important thing to note. So even if your Excel file is sitting in SharePoint, the connector is still thinking it's on whatever part of your hard drive that you synchronized with it. So it's going to be wanting to reach down into a hard drive through a data gateway, which is a pain, right? So instead, if you use the SharePoint folder connector to connect to your Excel file and deploy your report out to Power BI, when it comes time to do the refresh, it just goes off on a schedule and updates the data. All right. Hopefully that's fairly clear. We're going to move on to a couple of demos at this point. We got any questions in there, Eric? Jason, do you have any questions?
Nothing queued up.
Oh, John, I've got lots and lots of questions. I'll throw out one extra. Don't use the Excel file connector, folks. John put it way too nicely. It'll make you cry. There are so many better ways of dealing with it. Rather than using the Excel file connector, put that Excel file. You say, I want to be able to work with that Excel file. That's fine. You want to keep it local. Put it in either a synced SharePoint folder or in your OneDrive on your local system that's being synced. Work with it there. Go through. If you choose to go the way that John's showing you, which is a perfectly valid way of doing it, the SharePoint folder connector is great. The other one is you can always connect up to the web through the web connector as well. There are multiple ways to be able to get there, but do not use that Excel file connector. There's just you'd have to run a gateway. It's just a bad situation.
That's right. That's exactly right. All right, so we're gonna go through a couple of these scenarios. We aren't going to go through the connect to Excel just in the interest of time, and it's frankly I think a little bit less interesting. So that's we're not going to go through that. We're going to connect to some data that's in an Excel file. So just as a bit of background, I got myself a shiny new Ecobee thermostat about a year and a half ago. Maybe it's about 2 years ago. Well, we're going to know that here in a little while, and started recording data with that. And you can download your reports from Ecobee in CSV format. I converted a couple of them into Excel, and we're going to import that data to see what that experience is like. So to start with, I'm going to come down here to my Get Data button. So I'm in a Demos workspace in Power BI here. I could just as easily be in a personal workspace here, but I'm in a Demos workspace. I'm going to come down here to Get Data. And this is the default experience with Power BI when you first fire it up if you've got no content. And I'm going to come over here to Files because in this case, my data is in a file. I'm going to click on Get. And you can see how SharePoint heavy this is. If I connect, this is a version 1 Power BI workspace, not to get too technical, but this is connected to an Office 365 group in behind the scenes, which means it's connected, of course, to a SharePoint team site. And when you see, again, this is a Microsoft naming thing, the Power BI team thinks a SharePoint library is called a OneDrive. So that's why that says OneDrive Demos. It actually is the documents library in the Demos group or in the Demos team site that we're talking about. I could also come out here and go to any SharePoint team site that I wanted to. This is because I'm in this V1 workspace. In a V2 workspace, I can go to my OneDrive for Business, and in a personal workspace, I can go to OneDrive Personal and OneDrive for Business. These techniques work with SharePoint and OneDrive for Business. So I'm going to click on that, and you can see we have a number of folders here. I'm going to go into Deep Dive, and I'm going to click on Data. And here's this file I want to have import. So it's the month of September last year. Month of September 2019 is what this data is for. So I'm going to click on this and click on Connect. And I have these two options at this point. I could connect to it, and then it basically just is Power BI viewing the Excel file for me. But I'm going to go ahead and import the data now into Power BI. I'm going to click on it, and it's importing the data. This could take a little while. It won't take very long. But it's pulling the data now out of the worksheets that are in here and into a new data model. And there you go. There's my data set is ready. I'm going to click on View Data Set, and I'm taken to my report canvas. Over on the right-hand side of the screen, we can see we have a number of measures and dimensions. I'm going to work with those here in just a second. On the left, I can navigate around into the Power BI area. So we've got fields over here on the far right, and we have visualizations here. So to start with, I want to add a couple of things to my report. I'm going to keep this very, very simple. I'm going to start with cool stage 1. So that's how many times, how often my furnace was running in air conditioning mode. Or how many minutes it was running in air conditioning mode. Cool stage 2, I'm going to add that to my chart. Heat stage 1 and heat stage 2. So that's the total furnace run time for this period. I'm going to make this a little wider, and you can see we're using the new color palette that's been available to us, well, just this month, actually. Now, the next thing I want to do, and just to point out, by clicking those measures, it said, that's a number, and I'm going to give you a column chart. So that's what we're looking at here. I can go and change the visual in question by clicking on one of these visuals over here, and I'm going to leave it as column. Actually, I'm not going to leave it as a column chart. I want to add temperature to this eventually. So I'm going to add this to make this a line and stacked column chart. So my furnace ran for a total of about 300,000 minutes for the month of September that year. Mm-hmm. We got a question? The seconds, sorry, seconds. Yeah, that would be something. All right, so I'm also going to click on date to see how that breaks down. And now you can see it knew that this was a date field, and it's broken it out to me by days for the month of September. So you can see air conditioning last year ran for the first week and the third week pretty much, and then the furnace was also running. This is typical for where I live. I know that's not Texas. You'd never see heat come on at all, right? But that's the way it is here. And the next thing I want to do is add the temperature on here. So I'm going to come down here and go down to outdoor temperature. There we go. And I'm going to add this. And I want to add this as now a line value. I don't want to add that as another column value. And you can see the line value shows up. But there's something wrong with this, right? If you look on the left-hand side, we're in thousands, okay? And there's no temperature scale on the right-hand side. And I can tell you, even working in Celsius, we're not in the thousands of degrees a month. So what's going on here? What's happening is my Ecobee thermostat, every 5 minutes, it's taking a reading. And the reading is telling me how many seconds the furnace was running in that 5-minute period. Well, it's also giving me a reading of what the outdoor temperature was on average for that 5-minute period. Power BI sees a number and says, you want to add that stuff up. And that's what it's doing with my temperatures. So that doesn't make any sense. What I want to do with my temperatures is have an average. What I would normally do is say the property for temperature over here should be averaged, or the default aggregation should be averaged. I can't do that in the browser. That's one of the things I can't do. I can't change my data model. I can change my visuals, and luckily that is something I can do with my visuals over here. So I'm just going to come over here and tell it I want that to be an average. You can see the line changed, and we have a different scale over here on the right-hand side. And now you can visually see when the average temperature was high, the furnace was on. When it was low, the heat was on, et cetera, et cetera. Now, at that point in time, I can just simply save this guy. I'm going to go File, Save. Remember, I'm still in the browser. I'm going to go ahead and save that. And I'm going to say September 2018.
John, we lost your click stream there. Do you want to share off and on again?
I will do that. One moment here. No problem. Click stop.
I live with this.
You wish you could live with this.
That's very true. Oliveira has to live with this.
That's right.
I just deal with it on a regular basis.
All right. Are you still seeing the Power BI report? Yeah, I think you are. Okay, cool. All right, so that's our chart as such as it is. So basically, this is a snapshot in time. This is the month of September last year. So I've saved that off. I can go into view mode now. Go into reading view, and there it is. And on over here in demos, you'll see that report should show up in my report section. There it is, September 2018. And if I come down here to my data set section, you can still see it's named the same as that Excel file that I imported it from. I can come in here and schedule a refresh. Let's do that. And you'll notice it says OneDrive refresh. And because, of course, to the Power BI team, anything SharePoint is OneDrive. But this is SharePoint refresh. It really should be thought of. And because I use the browser, my only option refresh is on or off.
Hey, John.
In this case, I'd leave.
I think you might need to stop sharing and try again, because
Wow.
Is anybody out there seeing the screen? I just see loading at this point.
I'm going to off. It's showing as being shared on my end. Yeah.
Let's try again.
Yeah. When I reshare it, it's weird what it shows me, but okay.
There we go. Now you're good.
You got it? Okay,
yeah.
Cool. So this is that OneDrive refresh. No problem. This is that OneDrive refresh option in the data sets that I was talking about. And that's kind of it for that. Now, so that's the browser import experience from SharePoint. Let's do the Power BI desktop experience. Let's see what that's all about. So this is Power BI desktop, right? I've just opened it up. I already had it ready, so we didn't have to wait for it to load. But it looks an awful lot like that report editing experience we were just in the browser. And it is very similar, except we have a ribbon up here and we can do model editing. What I'm going to do first off here in Power BI desktop is I'm going to go and get data. So I'm going to click the Get Data button, and it should bring up a UI for me. And I could search around. SharePoint is under online services, but I'm just going to type in SharePoint in the search screen. I'm going to use an uppercase P because otherwise it'll drive Jason insane. It'll work with a lowercase though. And I've got three options here: SharePoint folder, SharePoint online list, and SharePoint list. We're going to get into the list stuff later. We're going to start here with that SharePoint folder that I was talking about earlier. So I could, just by the way, if I click on File, I'll stop searching. Get rid of SharePoint here. There we go. If I click on File or All, look what's at the top of that list, right? Excel. It really wants us to use the Excel connector. Please don't. Just don't. So I'll put SharePoint back in here. We're going to use SharePoint folder. And here's what we're going to do. That what we've got is in SharePoint. I've got to just move back here into a browser. In SharePoint, under the Documents folder in Demos, if we go into the Deep Dive and in Data, we've got that Excel file. But we actually have a collection of CSV files, and this is the folder I use. And basically, you have one of these for each month that the Ecobee was running. These files are all the same. They all have the same schema. And I'd actually like to put multiple months together. And even better, when I add new data in subsequent months, I want that to be brought into the report through the refresh mechanism. We can do all of that stuff by using the SharePoint folder connector. But the first thing I need to get is the URL for the site. So I'm going to grab that. I'm not going to paste. I'm going to hit Control C, not Control V. All right. Let's come down to desktop. And when I pick SharePoint folder, you'll notice that the dialog box comes up and asks for the SharePoint folder. So you're inclined to just, go get the URL for the folder. Don't. It's actually asking you for the site URL. I know. And by the way, the SharePoint folder connector has nothing to do with SharePoint folders. That even helps too, right? So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And what it's going to do is go off and interrogate my site collection and return all of the documents that are stored within that site collection, or more appropriately, the metadata for all of those. And that's what you see here. So if I wanted to just get the metadata and that's all I cared about, I could just go ahead and load it. But I need to transform the data in question. So I'm going to click on the transform data, and that's going to open up my Power Query editor, or the edit data experience. And you can see here, this is the metadata for all of the files in that file collection. Well, I only want those CSV files for eCabe. And I have a number of subsites in this site collection, but I know that the folder in question that I had the name Deep Dive in it. So if I come over here and I pick my drop down for the folder path column, I can go into text filters and say, this contains, and I'm going to enter in the words Deep Dive. And I'm going to click OK. And immediately, this is going to get filtered down. So this gets filtered at source. That's the other nice thing about this connector. And you can see now we've just got the Deep Dive folder and subfolders stored in here. Well, if I come down here, the only files I need are CSVs. I don't need any of this other stuff. So I'm just going to use the extension now to filter out everything I don't want. I'm going to deselect all. I'm going to select CSV, and I'm going to click on OK. All right. So these are the files that I'm after. Now, I want the contents of these files, right? I don't want the files themselves. Now, if you wanted to do what I just did and pull the files for a particular month, this is the right way to do this with Power BI Desktop, so you don't have to have a gateway. You would simply click on the binary link for the file in question, and that will load the contents of the file in. What's really going on is it's going to ultimately use the Excel connector, but it's going to first use the SharePoint folder connector, which essentially tells Power BI, you aren't local, you are in the cloud. But I want to do something a little more complex. I want to put all of these files together. And to do that, I'm going to use this little combine button on the upper right-hand corner of the column. You get that for binary type columns. So I'm going to select that, and it's going to go ahead and evaluate the query. It's basically going to inspect the first file and present it to me, say, is this right? Have I got this right? Am I using the right type of connector? Which it should pick CSV for me. And it does have that right. It's asking me what the character type is, etc. And this is going to be fine. Now we see a problem with this file right off the bat, right? We've got all this header information that we don't want. So each file is going to have this at the top. It's going to have the column names at the top. So I'm going to have to grit my teeth and say, I can't edit it here. I wish I could, but I can't edit it here. So I'm going to have to grit my teeth and say, yeah, okay, I'm going to have to just deal with that later. So I'm going to click OK. And what Power Query does is it goes off and it builds a number of functions. So the functions are going to be used to evaluate each file in turn. So you can see the problem we have here. This is the query we've wound up with here in the end down here. But up here, you can see a lot of these functions that Power Query has built for us. And you can also see the sample file it used to build it. So I'm going to click on that sample file. And you can see this is that header stuff that we wanted to get rid of. Well, the beauty here is any transforms we apply to the sample file will subsequently be used for every file. So if I make changes here, that's going to work down the chain. So let's go ahead and remove the first 5 rows. So I'm going to just remove the top rows, and the number of rows I want to remove is 5. Perfect. And then the next thing I want to do is say, I want that first row to actually be my column header. So I'm just going to pick that option, use first row as headers. Kind of nice to have that option. So go ahead and do that, and bam, it's transformed this file exactly the way I want it to, but it's broken my query. What am I going to do about that? Well, with Power Query is really just a succession of steps, and these are the steps we've built up already. And you can see we have an error down here on change type. Well, if we want to know where that error is, I can just go up a level. Oh, look, it's only on this last step that we've introduced this error. And we haven't really talked about it. With Power Query, you can just navigate up through earlier steps or back down below. and you can change steps. But in this case, all I have to do is get rid of this. And you can see the problem, by the way. You can see we've set the data types of these columns, but we're now referring to column 1, column 2, and now the columns aren't called that anymore. So all I have to do is get rid of that column type. And there we are. It's working. I don't need the name of the source file, so I can just happily get rid of that file. I know that this particular column, I do have to set the types manually, so I'm going to set this to date. I'm going to set the next guy.
Back to having a frozen screen again, sir.
I will stop and start it again. Wow. All right. Stop. No problem.
While he's doing that, Jason, Chris Weiss is asking.
I was actually typing the response.
Are you reading that?
To Chris. I am. So Chris asked, I said that the Excel connector will make you cry. What was the reason for it? And Chris, I'm typing you the response, so you'll be able to read it. But it's a file system connector, which means it's going to connect up to see my user, my documents, my desktop, excel.xlsx. So when it tries to go and refresh that, it's going to try and go to see my user, my documents, my desktop, excel.xlsx. Except from the cloud service, it can't talk to that. So it doesn't know how to reach C:. It only knows how to reach files in a, whether it's going through a gateway, then it could do it. So you'd have to run a personal gateway on your personal machine in order to access that file. It's a lot easier to go and stick that file into OneDrive, which syncs to your computer, which means that you can then edit everything locally in Excel and do all of the things. And when you close out, or every couple seconds or whatever, it'll sync back up for you. That's a better way to go. So you don't want to use that Excel connector. You want to use either the way that John has been showing you, which hopefully you were able to see, and it was just my machine here on the hotel Wi-Fi that was showing it, not actually being able to see what John was doing, through the SharePoint folder connector. Or you can go in through the web connector and get the actual file URL of the Excel file and connect directly up to that through the Excel or through the web connector. Hopefully that answers your question. Back to you, John, and hopefully we see your screen.
Yeah, can you guys see it? Can Eric? I'll ask Eric because you're in the hotel.
Yes.
All good. Okay, good.
Make circles with your mouse for a second, John. Let's see.
Ooh, I'm circling.
Now go the other direction.
I'm just kidding. Yeah. So what I was doing while Jason was answering the questions, I just set the data types of all of the columns. I set some text ones and I set some decimal number columns. It's a good idea to set your data types here in Power Query. But at this point in time, we're ready to go ahead and load that data now into our data model. So we're going to do some of the same things here. There's a couple of differences, however, because we have some flexibility. We could go into the relationship on the left-hand side of the screen. We're in the report canvas. That's the top icon over here on the extreme left. The middle icon shows us the data, and the bottom icon shows us any relationships. We only have one table here, so we don't need to use the relationship view. We'll see that here in a little later on in the presentation. But you can see we're loading in a bunch of data. We're at 100 and some odd thousand rows, so it's not that slow. But remember, every 5 minutes we're recording data for about a year. So let's go and do the same thing we just did in the browser, and we're going to do it against all of our data. So I'm going to start off again with cool stage 1, cool stage 2, heat stage 1, and heat stage 2. All right, and I'm going to expand that out. And now I'm going to come to date, and I'm going to select that guy with my visual selected. I'm going to select him. And now you see some different behavior, all right? Before we saw day, and how that worked. Now we're seeing 2018 and 2019. What's going on? Well, because we're pulling data into a fully fleshed model editor, Power BI behind the scenes is actually creating an automatic date dimension table for us. So if we come over here to the axis, you can see date has got year, quarter, month, and day. And I can drill down. I can pick my full drill down capability, and boom. And now I've actually hit it twice, and we've gone down to the month level, and we can go down further to the day level if we want to. And in fact, I don't want to use quarter, so I'm just going to get rid of this. And now we can see it's 2018, July, 2018, August. That's pretty good. I'm going to come over here though, And I don't like having the data labels concatenated like that. I like if I come down to the x-axis, I'm going to turn off concatenate labels, and you can see we have 2018 nicely on the left-hand side, 2019. That's kind of looking a lot like what I want to have it look, or how I want to have it look. I want to use stacked columns as well. That's a little bit neater. And I'm going to use stacked columns with a line chart. So I'm going to change to that data type. But right now we've just got our stacked columns. And the next thing I want to do is overlay that outdoor temperature again. So I'm going to come down to outdoor temperature. But this time, I'm going to come up here to my modeling tab. And I'm going to come over here to my default summarization. And you can see I can change it to average here. Why does that matter a lot? If you've only got one visual, it really doesn't matter at all. But if I'm going to use this measure in subsequent visuals, I don't want to have to go and make that change all the time. So it's best to make that change to the model. So I'm going to click on that guy, outdoor temperature, and I'm going to add him now over to my line values. And you can see how things are in my neck of the woods. You can see our summer this year was a lot cooler than it was last year. We didn't run the air conditioner hardly at all in June. We ran it for most of June in 2018. So you can get some interesting insights with this stuff. At this point in time, I'm in Power BI desktop. I want to go to publish this guy. Go ahead and save changes. I need to save it somewhere. I'm going to save it here, furnace, full. Save it off. I'm then presented with a list of workspaces, places I can publish it to. And I'm going to come down to demos. And once that's published off, there we go. I got it. I'm going to come back here to the browser. I'm going to come back to Power BI. And in here, we should see furnace full. That's the report we just published off. Oh, sorry, I just clicked on the data set. They're both named the same thing. There's our report. Okay, so that's the report we were dealing with. And we come down here to the data set, furnace full. If I come down here to schedule the refresh, you can see it's not that OneDrive refresh, but we have this option. First of all, well, we got to give it a second. It'll light up. There we go. Keep your data up to date. It's off by default. And you can come in here and add specific times when you want this refreshed. You have to add a specific time for when you want it refreshed on the daily basis. And that's really the full cycle. So you can see how you can pull data from SharePoint that's stored in Excel or a CSV. All right. Any further questions on that stuff? All right, we're seeing the slides. Okay. So then let's talk a little bit about using SharePoint as a data source now. When we're working with SharePoint data, and specifically we're talking about SharePoint list data. Well, in SharePoint data in general, we have a number of connectors. We're using Power Query. We want to use Power Query. We can use paginated reports, SSRS style reports, and now you could use Power BI Report Builder, which you use to build paginated reports. We're not going to get into that confusion right now. But for the most part, we want to use Power Query. And we can use Power Query in Excel or in Power BI Desktop. That's the native get data experience. We've got actually 4 connectors that we can use to get at SharePoint data. You've seen the 3 of the options that there: list, online list, and SharePoint folders. You can also use the OData connector to go at SharePoint data if you might have an older version of on-prem SharePoint, possibly, that doesn't support the native SharePoint connectors. The most important thing to note about using Power Query, as opposed to using something like SSRS in the past, is you're using this cached data model. And I really need to put that extra C back in the cache, don't I, Jason? I've never noticed that. You're using a cached data model. So when you're running your reports, you're working against data that's sitting in the Power BI service directly, not from a SharePoint list. SharePoint lists are not built for hammering on or for querying large. They're not built for large amounts of data, period. The stuff you build with Power Query is also supported by Azure Analysis Services or SQL Server Analysis Services. So this thing has a grow up story. You can hand these data models off to IT for proper management. Power Query lets you mash this data up with other data sources. I could pull some data from a SharePoint list. I could pull some data from a SQL table, and I could actually establish relationships between those types of data. I think probably the most important thing about Power Query is it has these helpers. So we're going to talk about them in a fair bit of detail here in just a second for complex SharePoint data types. And finally, this is all true whether you're on-prem or you're in the cloud because of the on-premises data gateway. If you're using SharePoint on-prem, you can use the gateway to derive all of these benefits. So if we get into did we have a sound there, Jace?
We actually have a question at this point.
We have a question. Perfect.
Yeah, George is asking, what level of Power BI do you need to publish to SharePoint?
You need a license. So that means what did you say earlier, Jace? What is it you can do? You can do everything by yourself.
Yep. So George, to answer your question, the free version of Power BI allows you to create reports and personal dashboards in your My Workspace. When you want to share with someone else, and the SharePoint, the modern web part for Power BI in SharePoint Online is a great example of this. Being able to put that in there, you as could go ahead and put that in there for yourself. But the problem is that you're not actually going to see that web part render. So you're not actually publishing anything to SharePoint. You're simply using that modern web part in SharePoint Online that visualizes the Power BI page. So you do have to have either a pro license, or if you have premium capacity, which is going to be one of the Azure-based tenant level SKUs, you have to have published that report into a dedicated capacity. And those, number of different ways that happens. Generally, we talk about it from the P1 SKU, which is, or the EM SKUs, which are how you visualize that in SharePoint.
Okay. Bottom line is someone's paying something somewhere, whether it's per user or per organization. So we talked a little bit about the SharePoint data connectors with OData. That's kind of how, and the rest of it is just spelling out what each one is for. And the difference between list and online list is on-prem versus online. I mentioned complex SharePoint column types a little while ago, and anybody who's done any development with SharePoint is well aware of complex column types. Text data types are fine unless they happen to be rich text. Numeric ones are for the most part fine. When you interrogate them, you're gonna get the data you expect to see. It's what showed up in the view. But there's a lot of column types that don't behave that way. The person field. You interrogate that, you might get a number, or you might get, depending on the version, you might get a number with a hashtag and a number and the name of the person, et cetera, et cetera. You interrogate a rich text field, you're gonna get a bunch of HTML because that's how it's stored. And Power BI doesn't know how to store HTML. There's a number of these complex data types that can be very difficult to work with if you don't have helpers of some sort. But thankfully, Power Query does come equipped with a number of helpers. And if you remember one thing from today, if you're working with SharePoint list data, please remember field values is text. That is your friend. There is a special column, we'll see it here in a second, that will return the textual representation of any of your SharePoint columns. So if it's a person field, it'll return the name of the person. If it's a lookup field, it'll return the name of whatever the lookup field is looking at, but in text. If it's a multi-value field, it'll return a comma-separated value of the multiple values. And it will parse out HTML back to plain text, which is also nice. We also get column extensions. So if we happen to have a lookup field, we actually have access through Power Query to that source data, but not just the data that was used for display, but all of the attributes of that source record. So if it was a person field, we could go get their email address or their manager or any of that sort of data. And then finally, Power Query lets us do what SharePoint can't do. SharePoint, no matter how many times you tell people don't build relational systems with SharePoint, it's not a relational database. People will still try to do it anyway. I mean, that's what the lookup field is all about, isn't it? People trying to do relational things with SharePoint. Or a multi-value column is a way to flatten out what is inherently a relationship. You can do this. We're going to see how to do that here in just a second. If you want detail, again, with the QR code on the bottom or the URL, it's the same thing. You have access to this deck, so you can go to any of these blog posts. I have a series of blog posts on my blog that were written last year that go in detail for each one of these field types, how to work with that with Power BI.
And that way you can actually also see the exact slide that John's on, since I believe that the deck is now frozen again.
It's frozen again.
You're on the
No,
working
you're good.
blog series, right?
No, that's you, Jason.
Yeah.
That's you,
And
Jason.
it's me. Oh, good. Okay, good.
All right. But it was plausible. It was plausible.
No, what's happening is the administrators are seeing a frozen share, but the users are actually seeing it functional because I'm monitoring it on another channel.
Oh, thank goodness.
So, yeah, it's big marker. And just being there's a few goofy things about this platform. But
yeah, okay.
Please carry on.
Nah, no problem at all. No problem at all. So to demonstrate how this all works, I'm going to go back here over to SharePoint, and I'm going to go to a specific list that I have. And this is a rather contrived list. What it is it has a column of every complex type. It actually has a column of every single SharePoint type that there is. And the scenario, if you will, is real estate. We've got properties. And we've got a number of real estate listings. So you can see here we have a picture, we have a location, and that's using the new location field. We've got the title, that's a simple plain text, obviously. More info, which is a hypertext field. Asking price, numeric, etc. Description is rich text. It's got HTML behind it, etc. And we have this amenities column, and it's a multi-value column. So what in our scenario, we want to be able to show the number of listings that have a specific amenity type attached to it. So to do that, we're going to build a Power BI report. So let's go back here to Power BI desktop where we were. And I'm just going to come up and create a new file. That's going to have to spawn a new Power BI. It'll take just a second. Let this guy load up. All right. And now we're going to go ahead and get data. And just as before, we're going to type SharePoint in our search box. And this time I'm going to pick the SharePoint online list because that's what this is. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to it. Again, it asked me for the SharePoint list. I'll give it the URL of the site because that's what you need to use. And I'm going to click OK. And this time now, it's going to go and interrogate the site, and it's going to return all of the lists within the site. And I do mean all of the lists within the site, all of the hidden lists, all the stuff you're not supposed to see, right? Things like the user information list, right? That's where all the person field lookups come from, or taxonomy hidden list, which is where your managed metadata stuff comes from. But if we come back up here to the properties list, the one we care about here, I'm going to select it. And I'm going to go ahead and transform data. And there's only 5 records in here. This is a small list, although you can work with lots of data. But it returns a colossal amount of data for the list, every possible piece of information you could want. And I don't want that all. So I'm going to just start deleting stuff. I'm going to get rid of these guys because, frankly, the server redirect embed URI is not something I'm ever going to use. The picture field, which I could go and get the picture stuff, I'm just going to get rid of it. I don't want it right now. There's that location field. Look, the new location field is really just a bunch of JSON that's stored within the column. I'm going to get rid of that guy too. Don't worry. We're going to figure out how to get some of this stuff back. We've got a neighborhood ID. That was a managed metadata column. It returns a number. We got description. See that HTML with div, class equals. Remember when we had to do this from scratch before these helpers were around, Jace?
I do. That was a nightmare. It was pretty awful.
The agent is a number. Even the string ID is a number. All right, let's get rid of all of that stuff. I'm going to get rid of more info and continent, etc. And I'm going to get down to something that's a little more useful. Amenities comes back as a list. We're going to come back to that. I'm going to get rid of content type ID and the compliance asset ID. And now you can see a number of columns right beside that. Continent, or country or region, state, city, postal code, street, etc. I'm going to lose geolocation. I don't need it. That's going to give me latitude and longitude. Those are all coming from that location field. So it gives us a lot of information we can work with. I really like the location field. But now I'm going to select this column. I'm going to scroll all the way to my right. And I'm basically going to get rid of almost everything to the right. Before I do, I want to point out a couple. See this agent column? That's one of those extension columns that I was talking about. So we have a person field called agent. And that's a lookup field. Well, if I click on record, that's how I get to all of that person information behind it. I'm not going to do that, but what I do need is this field values as text. And my UI is getting a little weird on me. All right, I'm going to select that guy. And I'm going to delete everything that I have selected. Okay, but I do still have this field values as text column that I was referring to earlier. I'm going to come and expand that column I'm going to deselect use original column name as prefix because I don't want everything named starting with field values as text. And I'm going to deselect all columns. I don't want everything, but I do want, remember I removed neighborhood and I removed description and I removed agent. All right, that's pretty much all I need. I'm going to just select those guys and click OK and watch what happens. Bang. There's the neighborhood comes up in text. There's that description in non-HTML, and there's the agent. Jason, you're selling properties for me. Way to go.
I'm doing the best I can, John.
I know you are. I know you are. All right, I'm going to come over here, and the last thing I'm going to do is change the ID field to a whole number field. That's just a bit of hygiene. And now I want to run this report. So I'm going to load this data from SharePoint into a report. Oh, I forgot to do something. You know what I forgot to do? I forgot to go get the amenities. Darn it.
You always have to get the amenities, John. Otherwise, none of it works.
Yeah. And you're frantically trying to screw up my data, aren't you?
No, I'm not.
You're not? Okay, good.
I already finished that. Come on.
All right. So I'm going to...
I'm a professional, John. Come on.
I'm going to come down here and extract data. So I'm going to throw in a column in between all of these different values. So you can see the amenities returned as a list. It's as a multi-value column. So I want to bring that out, and I want to put a comma in between all of the values, and that's what I've done. And to be honest, I could have used field values as text to do exactly the same thing. I just want to show you it's available another way. So let's go and reapply that guy, reload that stuff into the data model. There we go. And now I'm going to just start by creating a simple table of this stuff. So I'm going to start with the title. And maybe throw in the city and the asking price and the agent and the amenities. Okay, here we go. And I'm not going to format my numbers nicely, although I could. I want to get through here we go. What have you added in there? Smoke shack, 2-person swing. Awesome. All right. So what I want to do is be able to sort now on the amenities in question. So in Power BI, you'd use a slicer. So I'm going to come up here and I'm creating another visual. I just clicked elsewhere on my design pane or on my report pane. And now I'm going to turn this guy into a slicer. And you can see the problem here, right? Apart from what Jason's been up to, I can select on specific combinations of amenities, but I can't drill down and say how many of these properties have parking. Oh, the one other thing I want to do first before I get any further is count the number of properties. So to do that, I'm going to create what's called a calculated measure. I'm going to click on New Measure. And up here, I get the formula bar. I'm just going to type in properties. And at this point, I thought I was going to type in properties. It didn't take for me. Bear with me. I'm going to type in properties. And I'm in the DAX editor. I'm in the model editor. And it should look and feel a lot like Excel formula language. I'm just typing ahead, count rows. I'm going to just count the number of rows of the properties table. And I can scroll down here, select there. And I can hit the check bar. And I want to just display that count of properties on my report surface. And it's a number, so I want it to be a column chart. I want this to be a card. I just want to be able to see the number. And there we have 5 properties. All right, but we still have this problem, right? I can't select and find out how many properties for each one of these. So let's go back into my queries and see if we can do a better job with that. Well, we can do better. I know we can do better. I'm going to come over here to my Power Query Editor and just delete that last change we made. Go back to that list and pick the other option for extraction. I'm going to expand to new rows. And you can see what that does, right? I get a row for each unique value of data. So I'll go ahead and load that guy in and see how this works. Let the data load in. And now you can see we have each one of these unique values. If I select fireplace, I see 1. If I see garage, I get 3 properties. This thing is working for me, right? With one small exception. If I turn off my filters, I don't have 29 properties available to me. So there's something I can do that's better than what I did there. Okay, so let's go back to my queries. And I'm going to remove even this. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this query and I'm going to copy it. I'm going to duplicate it. So it's basically as if I went and got data twice. So I'm going to create a second table. I'm going to call this table amenities. I'm then going to select my ID column, and I'm going to come over here to my amenities column, select it, and I'm going to remove everything else. All right. I'm then going to do that same thing with amenities where I expand to new rows. And you can see what we have here, right? We've got the unique ID of the source item, and we've got the amenity value. If I come back to properties, I am just going to come over to amenities and extract the values again with that comma. And I'm ready to go. So I'm going to load this guy into my Power BI model. Let that data load in. All right, we're back to that problem before because you can see our slicer's got the amenities column from the properties table. I'm going to come down to my relationship editor, and you can see Power BI knew to build a relationship between the ID field and the two different tables. Well, I'm only going to make one change to that. I'm going to make it a bidirectional cross filter so I can select one in one area and have it cross filter the other. I may or may not want to do that, but in this case I do. And then I'm going to replace the dimension in my slicer with the value of amenities from the other table. Now that we have that relationship. So now we have a nice concise list of amenities. I can click appliances. It's going to behave, fireplace, etc. It's going to behave the way I want it to. And when I clear my slicer, I only have my 5 properties. I have just taken SharePoint data and made it properly relational from a reporting standpoint, which is fairly valuable. All right, I'm going to go ahead and finish off the demo section right now so we don't have to come back to it later. I'm going to go ahead and click on Publish. And I'm going to save off properties. And I'm going to save it off to demos. There we go. We're published. So now if I pop back to Power BI, you should see, if I pop into Power BI, not SharePoint, we should see a report in the report section called Properties. There it is. There we have it. There's driveway. It's fully interactive. It's exactly what we expect. Now, let's take it one level further. We're going to talk here in a second about using SharePoint as a platform. Let's go ahead and publish. Let's do that. The question came up before about publishing in SharePoint. How does that work? Well, this is the new UI in Power BI, by the way. So if you go to Power BI and it doesn't look like this, don't be surprised. I've got the new look turned on over here. So you may see the menus may be in slightly different places. So just be aware of that. I'm going to use this ellipsis here, and I'm going to come down here and hit embed. I'm still getting used to it. I'm going to embed in SharePoint Online. It's going to give me a URL. And if I come over here to SharePoint Online and I go to the home of the demo site, I can come up here and create a new page. And I'm going to create a new blank page. I'm going to call it DFW demo. And I'm going to add in I'm just going to search. Type in Power. There's our Power BI web part. Click on Add Report. Paste that same link now into this box. Let it load for a second. I'm going to use page 1. I'm going to turn off the navigation page. I'm just going to go ahead and publish this bad boy. And once I do that and dismiss all the prompts, you can see I will have a fully responsive, fully capable report embedded within the context of a SharePoint page. That's great if I've got modern. It's great if I'm in the cloud. What if I'm on-prem? Let's come back to the report and pick a slightly different option. I'm going to, first of all, actually, let's go over to on-prem. We've got a site over here. I'm going to, if I remember how, come up here and create a new page. I'm going to add a page. This will be a classic page on-prem. And I'm going to call it DFW demo. This shouldn't take long. I agree it shouldn't. So I'm going to come over here to insert. I'm going to just jump in some embed code, and I'm going to cheat and come down to some I've got saved off. It's just an iframe. So basically I'm embedding an iframe in here, and I just need to give it some content. What content? I got to come up here, come down to embed. And in this case, don't publish to web. That's anonymous. I'm going to use website or portal. This is the secure embed option. They've just recently changed the name of it. And I'm going to come over here to root site, go into source, get hit between those two quotes, paste that in and insert it. And once I save that guy off, we should get, again, a fully responsive Power BI report running in SharePoint on premises, classic mode page. All right. That is the demos. So I'm going to flip back to PowerPoint. It'd be a good place to take any more questions if we have them, or if we don't.
No, but John, why don't we make sure that we jump sort of to the TLDR portion of this, because I think we're running right at time, or I can do the quick version of these.
It's all you from here on in anyway, I think. So.
All righty. So a couple of things to note for you folks. We showed you Power BI Desktop. There are a couple ways to get Power BI Desktop. The best one is the Microsoft Store. If you're on Windows 10, just go in and type Store, and you'll be good to go. Type in Power BI Desktop. It'll come up. That will automatically update for you. You don't need admin permissions on your machine in order to do it. The other way is there's a full MSI that you can go download. It's in the upper right-hand corner under that little downward arrow when you take a look in Power BI Desktop. So there's a download for that as well. Power BI Report Server is the on-premises bits install for doing Power BI reports as a part of SSRS. It is sort of a superset, as they refer to it, of functionality on top of SSRS, even for SSRS 2019, which is now in RC2. So just something to be aware of. It's a lightweight installer. It's separate from the SQL Server Media. You download it. There are two ways to get it. One is to have SQL Server Enterprise Edition with software assurance. The other one is to have Power BI Premium SKUs P1 or greater. Gives you entitlement to the same number of cores on-prem that you have in the service. And it does render out Excel as well as PBIX files there as well. John, go ahead and move on to the next slide for me.
Yep.
All righty. So what is the difference between Power BI, the service, Office Online rendering Excel online, or Office Online Server rendering Excel online on the server, or SSRS and PBIRS? Short answer, Excel Online is actually what's doing the rendering of Excel file workbooks for you, either in the service or on-prem. So if you're doing on-prem with PBIRS, Power BI Report Server, you still have to have an Excel Online Server on-prem installation as a part of the Office Online Server on-prem world, or USOP, as we affectionately like to call it. Are you guys hearing me okay? Because I just saw Frank asked about audio.
Yeah,
I got you.
You're good for us.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. PBIRS and Power BI both do most of the rendering of things. Power BI, the service, is always going to be further ahead. They do Power BI Report Server releases 3 times a year. And now you can do all of the different reports, though, which is nice. John, next slide, please.
On its way. There we go.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. John just showed you the Power BI web part in SharePoint Online, which is a modern web part that will not be coming to on-prem. It has too many hooks so they've told us flat out it's client side. There's no server configuration you have to do for it. Works best with Office 365 groups. And again, it is online only. And in order to see it, you do have to have either a Power BI Pro license at $10 per user per month retail, or have the report published into dedicated capacity through one of the premium SKUs. Next slide. There we go. John just showed you also the secure embed mechanism. Again, same type of thing, client-side rendering. It does require a license. It's a script editor web part, as John just demoed. both online and on-prem reports, you can do the same way. Works very nicely. You can see that secure embed either in SharePoint on-prem, because again, it is an iframe script editor web part. So it works both for SharePoint Online and for SharePoint on-prem. Do not use the anonymous version unless you have data that is meant to be public, because it will be public. Anything that you use that says the word anonymous, anybody can get to. And I don't care if you say, oh, it's just on our SharePoint intranet. It's coming from the service, folks, that's being published, and man-in-the-middle attacks are real. Do not use publish to web anonymous unless it is public data. From a SharePoint dashboard's perspective, Excel services web parts using the Excel reports works just fine. SSRS reports, again, that's for on-prem only, using that report viewer web part from SSRS. That's an old school mechanism of doing it. We just showed you the Power BI web part for SharePoint Online only. Using Secure Embed is the new way of dealing with seeing any reports, both on-prem or online. You can do SSRS or PBIRS and do the RS : embed equals true mechanism for viewing interactive reports in a script editor web part there for an iframe, and other content types as well. Alrighty. If you were trying to do SharePoint embedding, this is why you want this deck, folks. This is our authoritative what goes where and does it work well table. So this is what you want to make sure you download this deck for, because this table tells you exactly if you're trying to share an RDL file from an SRS in integrated mode, where does it work? Where does it not work? How do you view it? Why would you not want to do that anymore? Well, because that's just SRS integrated mode is dead. But if you're trying to share something out of the Power BI service, how would you do that for on-prem? We tell you how to do it in this table. And as far as BI features in SharePoint 2019, there are none. I know that there's something there that says performance points deprecated. Performance point is dead, folks. If you have performance points still, find a way to get off of it. Power BI is replacing that functionality. Definitely want to get out of performance point. Everything else has been moved to the correct place, either Power BI or Excel Online. So definitely think about those things. There was a question from Tom Phillips. Are there any third-party competitors to Power BI that work on-prem? Absolutely. Tableau, MicroStrategy, as Chris Weiss is saying. Tableau is very much an on-premises answer. However, Power BI Report Server also works on-prem. So you have that capability and that functionality. So while it's not a competitor, it is a part of this world. That is the way that I would consider going as well. It's just a more cost-effective way. And to wrap everything up, hopefully this was useful to you. Look forward to seeing comments in the chat. Feel free to drop us notes. We'll show you our email addresses here at the end. Again, those white papers, download this deck. I did post that URL in the chat if you want to scroll back up. But we wrote these white papers for Microsoft. Lots of great stuff in them. John's blog, if you go out to whitepages.unlimitedviz.com, and also you can go out to www.bifocal.show to find out all of our stuff as well, which I think is the next slide. Ta-da! Yeah, and then in closing, John, do you have anything else to say, or can we turn it back over to these gentlemen? And
I think we're done. So yeah, there we go.
Wow, well, that's a lot of stuff, guys. Thanks for
we cut stuff out.
I know you did. So for those of you who want more information or a deeper dive into this, please take a look at upcoming conferences. John and Jason often do an entire BI day pre or post conference at mini events, which is a very deep dive into this information. And the few times I've poked my head in there so far deep into the stuff that I am completely lost. So if you want to get even more information from them, that is a very good place to go. Lots of good nuggets on the Bifocal show as well. Those previous recordings are available, I understand, right, gentlemen? People can go and check out the catalog.
Oh yeah. Everything's available. It's and all the podcasts are available through fine podcast aggregators everywhere, Stitcher and
117 episodes out there are all available through Stitcher, or we're now on Spotify. So feel free, go out there and listen and enjoy.
We should mention SoundCloud as well, because that's really where we store everything.
That's true.
So plenty of opportunities to get more information from John and Jason. Of course, look forward to if you're going to be at Ignite, we will try and get John and Jason to join us on our daily webcast from there as well, so they can share some of the news and information. I assume that there will be some Power BI announcements at Ignite, and so hopefully we can get their take on that as well. Thank you all for joining us. Remember that the recording will be available to you in about a week's time on our Big Marker channel as well as on our YouTube channel. Please visit our website at dfwsharepoint.com for information about upcoming meetings and events, and watch the special events page for more information about our Ignite live event coming up in November. So thank you, everyone. A huge thanks to Jason and John for doing this for us. We really appreciate it. Guys, I owe you both a beer next time I see you, which will probably be in Orlando.
I rarely say no to that.
Yeah,
I'm not sure who owes who more drinks, but I know I am behind in owing whiskey to Mr. Himmelstein, because he has graciously provided beverages the last few times. So I will definitely make good on that. Thank you, everybody, for joining us as usual, and we will see you right back here next month.
Cheers.